Scoopa doopa, scoopa doopa, scoopity boopity boppity scoopa doop doop, scoop dee doop dee doop dee doop dee doop dee. There is cotton on my table. Hello everyone, my name's Stonesy Boy and welcome to Reading with Stonesy. Welcome back. Today we are reading pages chapter 8 to chapter 11. We are reading 18 pages, so it shouldn't be that long. And without further ado, sorry, from the intro, I ate that cotton. I was hungry. So without further ado, let's begin. Chapter 8. Bobby's in a nightmare. None of this was real. That was the only explanation her mom could accept. But her body knew otherwise. When Johnny lunged her, she instinctively leaped back. Johnny kept coming, though. He gnashed his teeth and slashed at the air. "Johnny, it's me," she said, stumbling backwards, saying it out of reach. "I don't want you to hurt me. I'm your sister." Johnny leaped, and Bobby did the only thing she could think to do. She set a block of wood between them, quickly raising the pillar of oak. But Johnny wasn't able to change the direction mid-leap, slammed into it, falling to the ground. While her brother was dazed, Bobby quickly dropped more wood, encircling him. "It's like when we used to build forts, Johnny," Bobby said, keeping her voice light and calm. "You remember?" Johnny only growled. He could see the top of his bald head over the small pen she built. It was open at the top, but try as he might, Johnny could not hop high enough to get out. With Johnny no longer attacking her, Bobby had a moment to catch her breath. She turned to check on her neighbors, but Farmer Briar's infection had spread unchecked through the crowd. The entire group of survivors had been turned. They stood at the iron door, pounding and scraping, trying to escape out of the night. Bobby ducked between the two log bookshelves. Grief and hopelessness struck her with a raging river. She felt like she could drown, but she couldn't give in to despair, not until she had seen her own safety. She blocked off an aisle at both ends, lining the bookshelves to the either side of the walls of the structure, and improvised a panic room made of wooden books. She closed herself in completely, getting the last of her wood blocks assemble low roof just overhead. The space was small and narrow, more like a coffin than a fortress, but with a torch for light, it was so scary. She could barely hear the growls of her mindless neighbors through the walls. Cold comfort that. Bobby slumped to the ground, alive, but defeated. She plugged her ears, closed her eyes, and wished for sleep to take her, but it never did. It was a very long night. Chapter 9. Bobby was in sort of a daze when she realized that sunlight was pouring into the library. The realization made her like a bucket full of cold water. She didn't know about zombies, but everyone knew that zombie and sunlight did not mix. And her brother was a zombie now. As impossible as that seemed, it was true. Heedless of any danger that awaited her in the stacks, Bobby cut her way in the makeshift shelter. The villagers are all gone. Either they'd finally managed to open the iron door, or they slipped through the hole in the floor. Bobby quickly plugged that hole. At least some undead creature reached up below and grasped at her ankles. Right now, the only thing she had time to worry about was one particular undead creature, trapped in his wooden pen. Johnny was safe, for now, from direct sunlight. She could see just the top of his green head, turning tirelessly in the endless clockwise circle as he looked for a way in his block-wide prison. It didn't feel humane to leave him there, so Bobby blocked the windows, moved the lantern so that light could only ever compensate for the lack of sunshine, and cut away one side of Johnny's enclosure. He lunged for her immediately. Bobby dodged his grasp, quickly shoving him back into his pen and sealing it up once more. "Okay, that was probably my fault," said Bobby, her breathing ragged at her knees shaking. "Yeah, I probably should have seen that coming." Johnny, unseen inside his prison, growled at agitation. "You're just hungry, aren't you?" Bobby said. "Well, I understand, I guess, but you can't eat me." Johnny growled again. "I'm sorry," said Bobby, "but that's where I draw the line. Maybe that's what makes me a bad sister, but so be it," she sighed. "I'm sure I can find you something to eat a little less me." Bobby walked out into the daylight. It was all quiet, and just for a moment she could almost believe the previous night had been a terrible dream. She turned toward the town center where the neighbors liked to gather. There was no one there. The broken remains of Goalie lay in the dirt nearby. There was nothing left for her to protect her but 4 iron ingots and a poppy flower that looked from the distance like a bloodstain on the ground. Last night's fires had burned out, leaving several homes in ruins. The remaining structures had all had their doors destroyed. It seemed no one else had escaped the wrath of the zombies, but maybe she could still save her brother. The way Bobby saw it, there was a matter of education. She already taught Johnny a lot of things at the time she'd been born. She taught him not to pull her hair, he taught him not to share his toys, and not to jump on the bed that was occupied. She even started teaching him names of different colors. So teaching him not to eat her shouldn't be too hard, she reasoned. She started a simple test. So he got a juicy steak in the corner of the library and a fresh-baked cookie in the other corner. She opened Johnny's pen hard. Before he could react, he heard across the room to occupy a third corner. When she waited, would Johnny go for the dessert? Would he go for the steak? No such luck. Johnny stumbled directly toward her, reaching out, coming in for a hug. But then, as he got closer, lunging toward and gnashing teeth, Bobby was ready for the outcome. She covered one hand with an iron boot. It looked funny, but it prevented her from picking anything up. But it at least offered some protection. As Johnny lunged, she held up her arm, intercepting his bite attack with a boot. He gnawed harmlessly at the iron. Bad baby, she said. You don't get any food by attacking me. Wouldn't you like a soft, gooey cookie instead? Look how defenseless it is. Bobby growled and grumbled as he slobbered on her boot. And don't talk with your mouth full. After a few days, the constant growling started to give Bobby a headache. A reminder of Johnny used to cry all the hours of the night, and a pacifier of some kind might help. What had pacified a zombie? She tried everything, but she could get her hands on honeycomb, a piece of sugar cane, even an emerald, which might have been a choking hazard if Johnny still needed to breathe. He spat everything out of his mouth immediately. Nothing worked. And then one day she found him suckling a bleach-white bone. Where did you get that? She asked, and reached forward to take it from him. He twisted away with grasping hands, growling at her and holding the bone close. Oh, fine, Bobby said, watching her brother gnaw on the bone like it was candy. It's a little morbid, but at least you're quiet. Johnny slobbered contentedly. With the pacifier to calm, Johnny grew slightly less aggressive in Bobby's presence, and she considered letting him out of this closure a bit more often. First, she needed to test his instinct of the self-preservation, and so, one morning, she opened the library's iron door and threw Johnny's favorite bone outside. Johnny followed it, stepping right into the glaring sunlight. A moment later, he had burst into flame. Bobby drowsed her brother in a ready bucket of water and immediately dragged him back inside. Johnny, slightly charred and completely wet, growled miserably. This is for your own good, Bobby said, and she tied one end of the lead around him. The other end was attached to a wooden post she had set in the library. It's just until you figure out how to keep yourself safe. Johnny strained at the rope, determined to go back outside and retrieve his bone despite the clear and present danger of the sunlight. Bobby sighed. Something tells me you're going to be on that rope for a very long time. On his lead, Bobby had more bit freedom to explore the library. Bobby watched him just out of range. What would he do now that he could walk around? Would he pick up an old favorite book? Would he play an enchanting table or try to climb the bookshelves? Johnny didn't do any of those things. Instead, he knocked the nearest torch off the wall. Hey, Bobby said. No. Johnny growled. Clearly, he preferred darkness. Well, I need to be able to see, Bobby said, and she set a new torch nearby. Otherwise, you might be able to sneak up on me. Johnny grumbled. He batted in the blood-red eyes sweetly and let out his arms for a hug. Aw, said Bobby, coming closer. Johnny lunged forward, attempting to bite her, but she was just out of his reach. The lead held, and Johnny's teeth closed harmlessly in the air. Bobby sighed, then leaned over and patted him on the head. We'll keep working on it, she said. Chapter 10. Ben approached the village with caution. It was abandoned. It was much certain from this distance. Cobwebs stretched across the empty windows, vines clung to the dark buildings, and old, neglected fence had fallen apart, allowing whatever animals it once held to roam free. As last one building had burned down in its crumbling foundations. But abandoned only meant there were no people living there. In the past, Ben and Logan had stumbled upon all sorts of mobs in otherwise empty buildings, zombies, skeletons, creepers, and worse. And without Logan to lead the way, Ben might easily overwhelmed. So Ben took it slow. He started in the fields, where crop grew in abundance. He could hardly believe his luck. His bounty would sustain him for a while. If the village's chests were as full as the loot in the fields were full of food, he would be able to replenish his inventory in no time. He held a melon open with his weapon, a simple sword he crafted out of stone, grabbing a slice and devouring it with enthusiasm. It had been too long since he'd eaten fresh food. He wiped the juice off his sword, and then put several melon slices in inventory, keeping one to eat while he walked. The first house he checked was empty of any threat, which was easy to figure out because it had no door. Ben stepped inside across his chest and checked it for traps, and threw it open. It was empty. Slime balls, he cursed. Empty it was not what he hoped for, but here he was, a lot more houses to check, and not like he had anywhere else to be. 3 hours later, he was beginning into despair. He was clear that someone else had already helped himself to whatever treasure had been here. At this point, Ben doubted he'd ever find any loot, but as he looked around the village, he found no shortage of curiosities. In the town center, 4 saplings stood naturally close together, as if someone had planted them there purposefully. Nearby, a solitary poppy grew. It looked delicate out of the place, and bright pop of red among all the earthy browns and greens. And at the far side of town there was a building of iron door. Ben tried to peer through the small openings in the door, but the room beyond was dark. If there's anything of value in this village, surely this is where he'd find it. He lifted his foot above the pressure plate that operated the door. Then he hesitated. Is this a bad idea? He said. It's probably a bad idea, right? He looked again at the iron door, wondering what secrets hid behind it. Ah, slime balls, you win again, curiosity, he said, and he put his foot down on the plate. The door swung open in this dark room. Ben stepped inside and placed the torch beside her. He saw now that the library, or it had been, the only place was in complete disarray, with shelves that had been almost entirely emptied of books, dirt blocks stacked in front of the windows, and a few random blocks of oak strewn about. What had happened here? He heard footsteps in the back room. "Hello?" Ben said. There was definitely someone back there. He could see them moving on the far side of the empty shelves. "Just a humble traveling adventure here," Ben said. "No reason to lurk." He took a step forward and then stumbled over the pile of books. "Are you embarrassed about the mess? I'm not really judgmental. You should be in a state of... see the state of my inventory." His answer was a low, threatening growl. "Okay," thought Ben. That's not a someone after all, some kind of animal. "Here, kitty," he said, creeping forward. "I don't suppose you're guarding a precious treasure back there, are you?" As soon as Ben reached the bookshelf, as soon as he unobstructed view, he knew he'd made a terrible mistake. "Zombie!" he cried, and he stumbled backward, narrowly avoiding the grasp of the mob as it lunged for him. Ben was too surprised to go for his weapon. All he had to do was escape. He scrabbled backward, trying to regain his footing. The zombie's eyes flashed red as it lunged again. Ben flinched, closing his own eyes and bracing for impact, but nothing happened. Slowly, cautiously, Ben opened his eyes. The zombie filled his vision, grasping for him, but it was stuck somehow. It couldn't reach him. Ben got up to his feet and realized he was significantly taller than his attacker. "Aren't you a little short for a zombie?" he asked. Ben saw now that he was left tied to a wooden post. He couldn't quite make sense of that, unless it had some entangled itself by accident. Zombie growled, swiping impatiently at the air. Ben laughed. "You're like a little baby zombie, aren't you? That's adorable." He drew his sword. "Honestly, I almost feel bad about this." "Grar," said the zombie, as it clacked its teeth in an attempt to bite him. "See, you get it," said Ben. "Mortal enemies, the two of us. In the fight to the death." He raised his sword, ready to strike the creature down. "Stop!" shouted a voice, and Ben paused for mid-swing. A girl stood in the open doorway, wearing simple clothes, supplemented with an iron helmet and boots. She held a bow, loaded and drawn, but her hands were shaking. "Don't worry," Ben said, in what hoped to be a reassuring voice. "You're perfectly safe. I'll take care of this monster." He hefted his sword up once more, and then suddenly an arrow was lodged in his chest plate. Everything went instantly still and silent, as if time itself had stopped. Ben looked down at the arrow, then at the girl, who appeared to be as shocked as he was. Even the zombie had stopped moving and gazed mutely at Ben's injury. "Ow," he said at least. "You shot me." "I am so sorry," said the girl. "I can't believe you did that," said Ben. "That hurts." "Again, super sorry," said the girl. "But I mean, I did ask you nicely to stop." "Not that nicely," Ben countered. He pulled the arrow out of his chest plate. It had gone right through the armor, but I only nicked his skin. "I thought I was doing you a favor. By attacking my brother? That's not your brother. That," he pointed, "is a zombie." The zombie attempted to bite Ben's outstretched hand, and Ben felt approved his point. "He's my brother," said the girl, "and he's a zombie," he sighed. "Put your sword away, and I'll tell you about it." Chapter 11. Bobby did tell him everything. "I'm sorry," Ben said. "Losing your whole village like that. I can't imagine what that feels like." And he truly couldn't. Ben had never stayed in one place for long. He had a hard enough time imagining what it would be like to have neighbors, a family, much less what it would be like to have them all swept away in a zombie siege. "It feels bad," Bobby told him. "Really bad." Ben twisted, uncomfortable, in a somber silence that followed. The cat cast about for something to say, something that might lighten the mood. "Still," she said, and he folded a grin, "you got a pretty sweet house out of the deal." An entire village to choose from, Bobby had decided to stay in a towering temple made of stone and built far taller than any of the other buildings. It was more like a fortress than a home. When Ben saw the appeal in that than each purely aesthetic level, it was an impressive space, grand even, with high ceilings, stained glass windows, and colorful banners. It was messy, though. Bobby had stacked books everywhere. It was only where library's missing volumes had gone, and there were potions strewn out of the place, too, including the fresh one bubbling in an active brewing stand. It smelled a little off. Bobby scowled at him. "If you're trying to get me to look on the bright side, don't." She crossed her eyes. "There's no bright side, other than Johnny, who's not exactly himself these days. Everyone else I know is gone. They got bitten by zombies, and then vanished without a trace. They probably burned away when the sun came up," Ben said, and then he saw her scowl deepen. "Ugh," he added. "I'm sure it was very quick and painless." Ben picked up the nearest book and leafed through it. It's full of recipes. Then he realized the silence had gone for too long. He looked up to see Bobby watching him intently. "What are you doing here, anyway?" he asked him, a note of suspicion in her voice. "Nothing in particular," Ben shrugged. "The usual." "The usual?" echoed Bobby. "Attacking harmless kids?" "Not harmless," Ben encountered as he rubbed his sword chest. "Either of you." Johnny was literally tied to a post. "I'm a little biased, I guess," Ben countered. "Look, I'm a hero, an adventurer. It's my sort of whole deal." He puffed out his chest, flexing a bit, hoping he looked the part. "That means I fight monsters wherever and wherever I find them. And when I discover a village I abandoned or otherwise, I drop in on it. You know, to resupply." "To loot the place, you mean?" Bobby said hotly. "I know you're kind. You think villagers are just happy little idiots who exist only to make your lives easier, for adventures more epic." He frowned. "Well, our lives matter. And we don't have some epic times in our home, you know. There's one time a fox chased a bunny right through the center of town. Ben waited, assuming there was more to the story. And then no more details were forthcoming. He prodded. And, Bobby said flustered, the rabbit got away, I think. I hope. Ben scoffed. Too bad for the fox, you know. I once shot a rabbit with an arrow from 50 paces away. What? Why would you do that? To survive, Ben answered in a tone he hoped sounded very grave. Out there, it was all about survival, and I'd rather be a fox than a rabbit. Funny, you strike me as more of a donkey, said Bobby. Listen, I don't know what it's like out there, but I know that this is a peaceful place, full of good people who are just going about their business. All the heat went out of her. He deserved better, and then treated like we didn't matter. Ben felt guilty suddenly. His eyes fell to the floor. They mattered, he said. Of course they mattered. And I can tell you for a fact this village had the best melons I ever tasted. Bobby slapped him across the shoulder. You ate our melons? What was wrong with you? Hey, come on, he said, ducking her follow-up attack, and in doing so, he accidentally knocked the recipe book off the table. That was a compliment. Yeah, well, I'd pass it on to Farmer Breyer if I could, said Bobby. Just ask before you take anything else, okay? He picked up the book from the ground, placing it back on the table. What are you reading? This looks like recipes. Potion formulas, Bobby corrected. Oh, that reminds me. He hurried over to the brewing stand, removing the bubbling flask and giving it to Frida to sniff. Hey, would you drink this? I would not, Ben said. He could smell it from a distance, and it did not smell appetizing. Yeah, that doesn't look right, Bobby said, and she placed the flask among half a dozen other failed attempts. I'm not exactly natural at this, but I'm determined to find a cure. Cool, said Ben. A cure for bellyaches? A cure for sore feet? Bobby rolled her eyes. A cure for my brother, genius, she said. You're looking for a cure for zombieism. That's not a word, Bobby said, but yes, she sighed. But that's why I set up in here. Not because it was a sweet house or cleric used to live here. And that's where they're really talented at this sort of thing. I guess I was hoping to, I don't know, invoke some kind of their old magic. That's not surprising, Ben said. Clerics are always good with potions. He sniffed at the nearest flask, then recoiled. It's apparently harder than it looks. You know other clerics? Asked Bobby. Sure, said Ben. I mean, not the first time basis or anything. She shrugged. There's a good one the next time over. Seventon, I think it was called. Logan and I sold some of the rotten flesh a while back. Hey, he said, pointing a flask. Maybe the rotten flesh is the missing ingredient here. It can't make it smell any worse. There's a cleric nearby, and you know where to find them? Bobby leaned forward, and Ben shrunk back, expecting to be hit again. Instead, this time, he enveloped him in a hug. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Oh, sure, said Ben. I'm not sort of getting emotional whiplash, but you're welcome. She gripped his shoulder and shook him lightly. He looked a little maniac. Now, how do I get to Savatown from here? When was the last time you got some sleep or a decent meal? Ben asked her. I know where you can get a good melon slice. She took from him firmly now. Savatown, she said. Where? Okay, stop, Ben said, and pulled out her grip. Look, you can't just hop on to the other next town. You have to think about food and shelter, and it's easier than you think you'd get lost. But he shook his head. And that's not to mention the monsters. Did you think if zombies are bad? There's way worse things out there. It sounds like I need a hero, Bobby said, smirking. You know, the kind of guy who fights monsters wherever he finds them. Ben felt his mouth go dry. He definitely oversold his talents. Well, yeah, but, he said, casting an excuse to go allow him to retain some dignity. It's not like I go looking for monsters, and besides, I've got a lot of quests lined up right now, and I can pay you, Bobby offered. What, in melon? Ben grinned. It wasn't that good. I have emeralds, Bobby said. Heroes like emeralds, right? Ben did like emeralds. Ben, in fact, loved emeralds. He tried very hard not to show it. Logan had taught him that the key to any successful negotiation was to stay cool. He said. They're all right. I also have cake if you prefer, Bobby offered. Tell me more about these emeralds, Ben said, in a manner that was not entirely cool. Well, they're shiny, practically new, said Bobby. Every time a hero came through, they traded emeralds for whatever supplies they needed. But the village didn't have a lot of use for gems. We're mostly self-sufficient, so we just kept them stashed away in a safe place. She smirked, as if she could sense Ben's desperation, as if she could smell it. Escort me to Savatown and back, and the emeralds are yours. Ben made a show of weighing the offer, holding out as long as to mask his desperation. Fine, he said at last. It's a deal. But then we're out of the real world. You have to do what I say. No questions asked. You got it, hero, Bobby said brightly. You're the boss. Ben, perpetual sidekick, found it like the sound of that. That's right, he said. I'm the boss. He sighed, noticing the fading daylight through the temple's stained glass windows. One of the windows was broken, offering an unobstructed view in the late afternoon sky. I guess we should set our first thing in the morning. Bobby, can't you go in the sunlight, though? Said Bobby. Ben narrowed his eyes. Why does that matter? Because he's coming with us, Bobby answered. Obviously. Are you kidding? Said Ben. The kid who tried to eat me earlier today. That Johnny? I can't leave him here all alone, Bobby insisted. I'm responsible for him. Bobby opened his mouth to argue, but then he was struck dumb. How could she possibly think this was a good idea? And why would she go along with it? Heroes like emeralds, right? I'm regretting this already, he said, moaning. You'll keep him on a leash the whole time, right? A short leash. Bobby nodded, then saluted. Whatever you say, boss. But something in the way that she said it made him doubt her sincerity. Suddenly, Ben felt like he wasn't actually the boss of anything. And that's the end of today. So, next time we read, we're doing the second move. Oh my goodness. The second and second move of Stonesy. It's this whole thing. Next time we're reading chapters 12 all the way to 3. Okay, give me a second, please. All the way to 83, so chapter 15. 15. Whoop. 83. 61 to 83? Is that true? 61 to 83. Yep. So 22 pages next time. Ooh, it's going to be one of the more heavy ones. That's okay. So I hope you guys have a super fantastic, wonderful day. If you like Big Fisher, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.